This video is my reaction to the Lions' 38-30 win over the Ravens in Baltimore on Monday Night Football. Detroit really came in and beat up the Ravens. The score might have been an 8-point game in the end, 38-30. And in fact, the Ravens have the ball trying to cut it into a 6-point lead on the 2-point conversion. I understand that, but Detroit ran all over this defense. They totally controlled the game, in my opinion. Yes, it took some fourth down executions from Goff to St. Brown, a double pass or a toss pass, if you will. But Detroit's defense, look, they got to Lamar Jackson, 7 sacks. They played a mix and match brand of defense by, displaying man consistently and then oftentimes switching or dropping out to zone. Credit to Kelvin Shepard and the Lions defensive staff for that. It allowed guys to get there late. I don't think these were just organic wins by Detroit's pass rushers. Aiden Hutchinson did have one, but generally I think these were sacks where Lamar's looking for something to happen downfield. He kind of moves in the pocket because nothing makes itself available, and then guys like Muhammad, Derek Barnes, Jack Campbell, and others clean it up. A very physical game tonight, I thought, for Detroit. They were the more prepared side, in my opinion, and more aware from the players on the field. Goff finished a very efficient 20 of 28 passing. I thought the Lions controlled large stretches of this game. The interior downhill run game, essentially duo, one of the most boring plays in the game of football at times, don't get me wrong. But that concept befuddled the Ravens defensive staff. 12 personnel duo, even 11 personnel duo. The Ravens nickel defense could not stack up. And then the Lions, John Morton, you got to take your hat off to him as well. You have the 4th and goal sweep pitch from St. Brown to Gibbs. I think that one's in the third quarter. Gibbs and Montgomery shared the load again. In this case, it was a little bit of a role reversal. Gibbs ended up being the big play guy at a 72-yarder, and then the 31-yard touchdown run in the fourth quarter that, essentially puts it away, makes it 38-24. Detroit finishes with 224 yards rushing on the ground, and that's only after the kneel down by Goff took it from 225 to 224. Montgomery, I believe, finished with 151 on 12 carries. He absolutely lit up the Ravens defense with his knifing, almost patient style. Definitely want to do a film study video on the way that he runs duo and some of the inside zone concepts. Like I said earlier, he had the 72-yarder where I think Humphrey tracks him down. The 31-yarder to take a 14-point lead. The Lions' offense tonight, super efficient in the toughest moments. The most challenging situations on Monday Night Football against the Ravens on the road at M&T Bank Stadium, they were 7 of 14 on third downs and 3 of 3 in converting fourth downs. I'll have a little bit more to say about the Lions going for it on fourth down at times and kind of a large-scale thought that some people in the Lions Discord have had for kind of a couple of years. Detroit's a serious football team. Right now, the Ravens are not. I think, let's focus on the Lions for a moment. They deserve it. Like I said, more prepared, more physical, but a better approach. The offensive line was clearly a key, right? That 18-play drive in the second quarter, that was a statement. And when I say approach, I mean things that are consistently repeatable. I don't want to say a safer style of play. That sounds like a criticism, and it's not. They rely on the running backs, at least tonight, getting downhill. Seemed like Baltimore's defense kind of outside on the edges was able to stack up. They were able to deal with outside zone stuff. But duo and inside zone, the Lions' offensive line executed it early and often. They beat up the Ravens' front. This did not have anything to do with Nnamdi Madubuike not playing. Zero. This is a front that the Lions showed they could block. Essentially, they're 12 personnel, 11 personnel against our nickel defense. And the Ravens just pretty much stayed in it and expected a different result. And credit to Detroit and John Morton for, something's working and don't break it. Continue to call those plays. And then in the critical moments, I think that's when you can really see a huge difference between these two teams, at least tonight, right? Hopefully, it'd be great if there was another matchup later on in the season. It would mean they play in the Super Bowl. That'd be fun for me and fun for all of you listening. I get it. But right now, the difference between these two teams can really be illustrated the best by looking at critical moments. Compare the Ravens' fourth down play call. Hurried up to the line, almost seemed rushed from a player standpoint. And then you have, for example, like Goff converting the 4th and 3 to St. Brown on the opening possession, right? When Detroit goes down in 11 plays, 67 yards, and they take a 7-0 lead. Now, they didn't need to convert a fourth down on that 18-play drive, 13 of which were run plays. That one put them up 14-7, right? But they did use a real slick double pass, toss pass, whatever you want to call it. I think it was Montgomery back to Goff, obviously, and then to St. Brown. If you don't know and you're a Ravens fan and you're listening, Montgomery, high school quarterback, so they've often used him to throw the football in certain situations. But a spectacular play. That was during their drive to tie it in the third quarter, 21-all, after Baltimore had opened the third quarter with a touchdown of their own. And then you have to talk about how well St. Brown played. I think he was the best player on the field tonight, outside of the Lions' offensive line, obviously. St. Brown beats Humphrey for that 18-yard touchdown with like 5.5 minutes, 5:20 left in the third quarter. He's also the pivot, he being St. Brown, on the sweep pitch, the 4th and goal play, to allow Gibbs to score on the first play of the fourth quarter. It's flawless execution from multiple perspectives, right? St. Brown taking the handoff and then pitching it back. Great. But look at how Goff gave the ball to him vertical, point up and down, so that Gibbs has the ball in the option position. If you've ever done the option pitch drill, right-handed or left-handed, hopefully you've done both. If you've coached it or played in that system, it's to their right. So St. Brown is a right-handed football player. They're not asking him to pitch it left-handed. You can really tell if a team is an option football team if they run option to their left and the quarterback ever pitches it. Clearly, Detroit's not an option team, but when they asked him to do this, the small details are important, and it's to his right. Goff is presenting him the ball. It's already in the option position with the points up and down, and then a smooth pitch to Gibbs for the touchdown. Right now, could you, if you're a Ravens fan, could you expect Baltimore's offense to execute any of that? Could you expect them to execute on a 1st and 10 from the 40? Let alone a 4th and goal? I could not. We're predictable in those moments offensively. Like I said, the 4th and goal where Lamar is sacked by Jack Campbell. Lamar, fortunately, recovers the fumble. It's hard to believe that the Lions didn't know that play was coming. I mean, that play and other right-handed concepts has been a staple of what Baltimore's done on two-point conversion plays for years. And I'm talking about dating back to the road loss against the Steelers in 2021. It's the same play. That stop by Jack Campbell, credit to the Lions for making the stop, right? But what I'm trying to illustrate is I think that's a hardball play. That supersedes Todd Monken's time here, or precedes, I should say. Greg Roman was the offensive coordinator then. I think you've got a series of hardball plays, and in my opinion, it's possible that some of the ones that irk or annoy us Ravens fans the most are the ones that Harbaugh has his finger on. I could be wrong. More on that later. But compare that hurried nature of that play to Goff's final throw. And I'm talking about the 4th and 2 to St. Brown, the conversion. It's against Humphrey, who gets called for a hold. It's a perfectly lofted pass, right, over the top to retain possession with less than 2 minutes left. It looked like it was over, right? I don't know about you. I thought maybe they would take a knee, but I guess we had timeouts remaining. Montgomery busts the next play for a 31-yard touchdown on the next snap. Just a truly efficient performance. Very professional and tough physical football team, the Lions, that didn't wilt in those moments. If these teams play again, months later, maybe it could be a different story. But right now, the way the Lions are coached, the way they prepared for tonight looks superior to me. Whether it's 4th down, a critical 3rd and 7, it seemed like Goff found Laporta on a lot of those. Only have Laporta for 4 catches on 4 targets. I wonder if all 4 of those were 3rd downs. Perhaps it was only 3 of them. But in any case, that play, the one to St. Brown, I think the ball was snapped just inside of 2 minutes left in the game. I might be wrong. Maybe it was 2:02 as the ball snapped. The tone could be drastically different for what we're talking about tonight if Detroit fails there, right? But they're accustomed to those 4th down situations. And this next set of comments I'm going to make is not about 4th downs. It's about preparation and levels of it. The Lions, execute them. Maybe that flows from Dan Campbell down. Maybe the coordinator's down. Maybe the player's side. Maybe it's a horizontal flow from Goff and St. Brown to others. But they can execute in those high-pressure moments. And like I said earlier, St. Brown was involved in all of it. I thought he was the best player on the field tonight with 7 catches for 77 yards. Had the touchdown against Marlin. The 4th down catch inside 2 minutes that really clinches the game. I know that there's the Montgomery touchdown, then the Andrews touchdown, and then the onside kick. The sweep pitch is beautiful. Definitely want to take a look at that once the film comes out. Again, that was on a 4th down. I just think there's something special about Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I've thought it since really 2023. I knew after the 2022 season that that he was a great player, a very, very good player, close to great. And then 2023, I was like, okay, this is just who this guy is. He just shows up every week, and he drops 32 points on you, to use a basketball analogy. He's just a fantastic player, and he's reliable and produces in the biggest moments. The Ravens did make it close late. I know a 38-30 loss. For some would say, well, Coach, you're awful negative for only a one-score loss. I think that you can extrapolate more from this. And here's what I mean. I saw something before the season that bothered me as a Ravens fan, but I kind of had to shake my head and say, okay, I understand it, and I'm going to bring it up now. I don't know which social media platform it was on. I guess Twitter or X. Someone shared a top 5 teams in the NFL. And the Ravens were on there twice. Number 1 was the Ravens, and then like in parentheses, it was this is the version of the Ravens that everybody thinks resides in Baltimore. And then there was, the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Bills, etc., the Packers, Lions, whatever. I can't exactly remember who 3 and 4 were. But then down 5th or maybe even 6th, it was the Ravens again, and it said, this is who the Ravens actually are. And at this point in the season where we are, 1 and 2, staring 1 and 3 in the face, got the Chiefs on the road, and then the Texans, and then the Rams at home. That picture, that I saw in the preseason, it just kind of jumped back in my head tonight. It's hard to believe with what we watched tonight that the Rams, when they come into Baltimore, aren't going to be able to line up in 11 personnel against our nickel and just bash us with duo and inside zone. Totally outcoach our defense. I mean, could you trust Zach Orr right now calling defensive plays against Sean McVay? I just can't say that I could. We gave up 224 yards tonight on the ground, only produced 84 rushing yards ourselves with Derrick Henry. Our offensive line is not up to the task. Simply put, they cannot consistently make good things happen. And they got confused at times with Detroit dropping so many guys out. I don't know whose fault that is. Maybe it's Lamar's fault. Maybe it's Tyler Linderbaum's fault. I'm not sure. All I know is on obvious passing downs, Detroit had a huge advantage. Why? They stopped the run for the most part. Henry did have the 28-yard touchdown run in the first half, right? But other than that, there was large stretches of the game where Detroit had their whole playbook available to them from the standpoint of run or pass plays. And the Ravens' options, their available play calls for Monken, have been whittled down or tightened somewhat. And then Detroit is playing against a known situation, meaning they know it's a pass play. I get it that Derrick Henry fumbled again. It's a great play by Aiden Hutchinson. To watch my Ravens lose to the Lions, the team that I spend so much time covering as well, there's obviously some ambivalence there or multiple thoughts occurring. But to see Hutchinson make plays, I think he had 2 or maybe 3 tackles. He had the sack, which I thought was one of the few clean sack wins that Detroit had tonight. The rest of them, people could probably categorize as coverage sacks. I don't really get into that, those phrases like that. In my opinion, 7 sacks is a noteworthy performance. Muhammad having 2.5 of them is, borderline historic for his career and for the Lions, especially with the position that their defensive end group is in. I still think they've got to address that position. But Hutchinson was kind of dormant for much of the first half, probably as a result of so many chips, right, by the tight ends, etc. And then he got hot. He had the sack on the inside move, the forced fumble on Henry. You have to talk about activity level if you're going to evaluate this game. And so that's players. Don't get me wrong. Hutchinson, Barnes, Muhammad, Campbell, Anzalone, those guys were active. They were hostile. They refused to not get to the football. The Ravens defense just doesn't come close to matching that. The toughness level is not there. Baltimore's given up 97 points through 3 games. They're in the same place they were a year ago. It's really like Groundhog Day in that this team is not prepared for the toughest of moments against the best teams when it's high stress. Close game, this team folds. And Harbaugh's the man in charge. He should take responsibility and state it as such, but he won't. We'll get words like consistency, execution, discipline, which is really just a lot of deflection. And that's what Harbaugh's best at least right now. That's all he's done in recent years. It's been, and I think that we have to admit it, it's the MO for the Ravens organization right now. They've got a ton of talent, but they've got a gaping hole at the interior offensive line position. Yes, Madubuike not being there has an impact, but from a schematic standpoint, Detroit had us in a bind. 12 and 11 personnel against our nickel. They were able to execute their run game, and really there was nothing that Baltimore could do about it, or nothing they chose to do about it. We can't possess the ball for long stretches, and then that's, we do make big plays, splash plays for sure, but we're oftentimes playing uphill. I know that Lamar finished 21 of 27 passing, 288 yards, 3 touchdowns, so the stats look great. But it was a game where he was sacked 7 times. We were certainly not in control of it, other than the point where we take a 21-14 lead early in the third quarter. But the defense gives that up immediately, forfeits it. I thought Detroit was more physical. They played smarter, more consistent. They've clearly got a better offensive line. And I think they've got better attention to detail. And that comes back to haunt the Ravens in the closest of games. To me, to talk about winning the AFC North is way out of the realm of discussion right now for me. You've got the Bengals, the Steelers, and the Browns. Neither one of those is a good football team overall. I guess from a talent perspective, the most balanced one right now is Pittsburgh of those 3 teams, right? Cleveland, of course, has a dominating defense at times. The Ravens are in a position where they should win this division, but they're so far away from it right now that I think it's really not worth talking about. The level of detail for Baltimore is lacking, and that, to me, falls on coaching. If you are stressing certain things on a daily basis, then certain outcomes or outputs don't occur in games. I don't know if Derrick Henry's suddenly fumbling because something has changed with Derrick Henry. I don't know if it's our coaching. I just know there's things happening on a weekly basis in Baltimore that cause us to lose football games, and Derrick Henry's really never been one of those guys before. But in any case, back to the level of detail. Detroit executes in the biggest moments. Baltimore can't do that. And as someone pointed out on the Lions Discord a couple of years ago, I believe it was leading up to the San Francisco game in the NFC Championship. I don't remember who it was that posted it, but basically the Lions, go for it so often on 4th down, it kind of becomes normalized. I wonder if it becomes normalized, meaning it's not a new thing when you go for it on 4th and 2 with the 2-minute, with a 7-point lead at the 2-minute mark on the road from near midfield, which for most people is a harrowing situation to encounter. It's really part of what they do. And I feel like that's the difference between these 2 teams, at least tonight. But I feel like we can also extrapolate and make larger statements. What we watched tonight was the result of preparation. Dan Campbell had the Lions prepared for the toughest situations. He had their defense, him and Kelvin Shepard, had their defense prepared to adjust, meaning the first time Lamar scrambled against man-free, I think Aikman even talked about it. Thereafter, there was a lot of mug looks, and then some man, don't get me wrong, but they were oftentimes dropping out in zone. They were prepared and they were able to adjust. The Ravens don't adjust. They don't seem prepared to do so. Same thing a lot of us talked about after the game against the Bills in week 1. Same thing we talked about last year early in the season. Defensively, we're not capable of making adjustments. I guess we'll see in a week, right, how things work out. What I mean is if the Lions' offensive line gets destroyed by Cleveland and just can't score any points suddenly, then, we understand, okay, the Browns just have an absolutely devastating defense that's going to hold people down. I don't think that's the case. I think they got lucky to win last Sunday against the Packers and really could be 0-3. They're 1-2, and we have the same record as them. Well, they have Joe Flacco as their quarterback and Stefanski calling plays. I think Ravens fans have every right to be pissed and expect some level of accountability from Harbaugh. I doubt we get any. He's rolled out there with a subpar offensive line for the 2nd year in a row, and then this level of defensive performance with some of the talent that we've got. I would say this, and then I'll move on to some positives about Detroit, obviously. Maybe John Harbaugh should do something about it, right? Help the defense prepare, help them plan, help them game plan, assist with strategy during the game. That would be my normal reaction. But at this point, I'm comfortable saying I don't think he can. I don't think John Harbaugh is capable of helping the defense prepare and adjust during the game. I don't. I suspect he's the guy running the show overall, and I do think he's got his finger on some of the 2-point and 4th down plays, and that's why we see them in certain areas of the field. We see the same calls over and over again, dating back to like 2021 or 2020. Oh, by the way, they're calls that Greg Roman ran while he was here. They're calls that Jim Harbaugh ran at Michigan before he linked up or relinked up with Greg Roman out in Los Angeles with the Chargers. My point is there's hardball plays, and I think his time in being involved with the offense is done, and maybe his time in Baltimore overall at some point in 2025. I know he just got an extension, but that's my rant on Harbaugh. I don't trust him. I don't have faith in his ability to run this operation and keep a tight ship against a badass football team like the Lions. I feel like Ravens are always going to break. Detroit, let me show the third possession here. I want to talk about that 18-play drive. Let's look at it. I know that I got this reaction video out late, but I had a lot to say. So there's a lot going on here and a lot of plays listed up. So my apologies for that. Maybe in the future I need to section it out or something, or point to the ones that I want to talk about. So once we get to 12 personnel near the bottom, it's 12, 12, 12, 13. Look at what's happening. The Lions have got to our 30-yard line, fourth play from the bottom. 1st and 10, positive 30, 12 personnel, twin wing, run concept. 11 yards for DM. David Montgomery's got a long last name, so I just abbreviate in my notes, DM. The next play is a 1-yard run by Gibbs, and then a 9-yard run by Gibbs. Goff sneaks to get it. Really cool setup. They had St. Brown in the backfield, and they normalized us to that look. Twice earlier in the game, they had St. Brown in the backfield, kind of offset, almost like a halfback. And then that sets up the 4th down play call later on. So just some real brilliance to what they do offensively. And there seems to be a plan where the same formation that they utilized for a key play later on was established or shown to us previously. And I just think there's an extra level of preparation there that we don't really have. So this 18-play drive, I obviously don't have the touchdown at the bottom of it because it was so many plays. But they did face a 3rd and 7 and it hit Laporta. A 3rd and 8, it's like the 7th or 8th play down for you. It's into the second quarter. 3rd and 8 from the negative 30, they hit Laporta for 14 yards. Kind of knew, or we had an idea, right, that Laporta was going to cause us trouble, especially into the boundary. As soon as he got near any of our will linebackers, we had issues. But the Ravens didn't really match up with him. Maybe spending so much time focusing on St. Brown and Jamison Williams opened things up for Laporta. I felt like they could have got him 7 or 8 catches this game if they wanted to, but once the run game opened up like it did here, you didn't really have to take chances. Moving forward a little bit, talking about the Lions' 6th possession. This is in the 3rd quarter, so the Ravens have gone down and taken a 21-14 lead that looks very different looking back on it right now, or I should say feels very different. I am really interested in this 21 personnel pony group that Morton threw out there. Basically, you have Montgomery and Gibbs both on the field at the same time. In fact, they ran a Maryland I with it. That's actually the name of it. So you'll have both running backs, Montgomery and Gibbs, in the I, but Laporta as a tight end set between them. Really cool personnel group. You never see, really cool formation, I should say. You never see Maryland I in the NFL at all. I mean, you still see it in college occasionally at the NFL level. Essentially, Maryland I means 3 running backs lined up on the midline in a row, as opposed to 2, where you normally have a tailback and a running back. This touchdown to St. Brown was exquisite, man. I mean, the motion pre-snap gets Marlon isolated. Maybe the Lions felt like they could attack him. Marlon doesn't normally get beat on those routes unless it's against George Pickens. He's a guy who seemed to beat him on fades or deep stuff down the sideline. It was a great throw from Goff. St. Brown just seems to be a guy that if they need to ride for 12 or 13 catches in a game, he can give you that. But if they want to use him as a pivot or someone to just get pivotal plays, here he gives you the 18-yard touchdown to tie the game at 21. I thought that was a huge moment. They only faced the one 3rd down, and again, it's complete to Laporta. It's the 3rd play down from the top. Again, we're jumping from the 18-play drive to the 3rd quarter, but the point is, anytime that they needed a 3rd down conversion, they went to Laporta. And when they had an important moment, St. Brown was involved. I do want to talk about the defense for a moment. Awesome to see Muhammad get 2.5 sacks. He's bounced around the NFL. I still think overall DN depth is a real issue for Detroit. Not tonight. They made it work clearly. More sacks than the Browns had, which is crazy. Shepard, I believe, did a nice job adjusting during the game. But if you want to be honest about the offensive coordinator versus defensive coordinator balance, both defensive coordinators on these teams have the inferior side compared to the opposite side, but compared to the offense for each team. But the difference is, I think Shepard recognizes some of the deficiencies, and that's why he's bringing pressure at times to force Lamar to get rid of the ball early, and then faking that look and dropping out in zone. Detroit played a hustling brand of defense, relentless pursuit. They blocked better, they tackled better, and still to this day in 2025, with all the bullshit rules that the NFL has to try to make the game look different, those two things, blocking and tackling, is at the core of football even still. I thought for the most part, Detroit just played a better brand of football, smarter, and able to stop or control our run game. Like I said, Henry did have the 28-yarder in the first quarter when Baltimore was really, rolling offensively. But to be real, I thought many of the play calls by the Ravens were panicked. Whether it was offense or defense, the Lions seemed in the moment. They executed in big moments. The fourth down call by Campbell with 2 minutes left, it's Morton that makes the play call, but Campbell is the guy who makes the decision to go for it. They stayed true to their identity. They have an identity. And Monken, as great as his offense has been, and I'm still a huge supporter of what he's done here. In fact, I think Harbaugh should just leave him the heck alone and let him call every single play. Monken doesn't necessarily have an identity because he wants us to be good at so many things. And we've been able to handle that. We've been able to juggle that, if you will, in the last couple of years. Tonight we could not. The Lions found their identity, or they had an identity running the football. I get it. At one point the score is 31-24 and then 38-30. And the Ravens did actually slow down Gibbs early in the game. I think his first 9 carries was for like 10 or 12 yards. Maybe it was more than that. But in my opinion, what Detroit was able to do tonight was solely due to their execution, their offensive line efficiency, and their ability to block our front. And we could not do that consistently. I do think Goff deserves mention here. He's really great at running the right play. They've got run plays called, and they succeed. I don't think that it's that simple. I think Goff has a run play called, and he's exceptional at recognizing what's there by the defensive look and what might not be there. I can't prove it on film, right? We don't know what's going on in his head, and very rarely are reporters going to ask about an individual play, so I can't prove or disprove any of this. But what we do know is Goff has admitted they've oftentimes got 2 or 3 plays called in the huddle. Tonight he was in control. Detroit outgained Baltimore 426-318, if I did my math right. And that was only made so close because of Lamar's late touchdown to Andrews, right? The Lions averaged 6.5 yards per play compared to 5.9 for the Ravens. Detroit scored 24 points in the second half. Yet another game where, Zach Orr's defense, once things start going downhill, that's it. They fall off a cliff, and there's no coming back from it. Yes, those things generally occur against high-level quarterbacks, but if you want to win a Super Bowl, hell, if you want to win a couple playoff games, you're going to have to do it against good quarterbacks. And really, if you don't think Jared Goff's a great quarterback at this point, you can just exit stage left because you haven't been watching the games, and you certainly didn't watch tonight. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and those guys continue to be 2 steps ahead of our players and our defense, especially in 2024 and this year. I don't know that Harbaugh and Orr can do anything about it. This is a very negative view from a Ravens perspective heading into Kansas City because we're facing Patrick Mahomes, but I'm just not sure that we have the ability from a coaching staff to do anything about this at this point. Usually I read out on some first play notes, but I only want to read you 2 paragraphs. Lamar is 8 of 9 passing. These are my first half notes, which I literally just read out to you guys. Lamar is 8 of 9 passing. The Ravens are averaging 7.0 yards per play. They have a lot of big plays, including a 28-yard touchdown run by Henry. Not much done by Flowers, who hasn't been targeted yet. Meanwhile, the Lions are 6 of 9 on third downs and 1 for 1 on fourth downs. Again, this is all just first half data. And this is a blueprint for how Detroit wears people down on offense. I didn't even remember writing that until I got into creating this reaction video. It was a fun first half to watch, even though Detroit took the air out of the building with that drive in the second quarter. Baltimore had only run 21 plays compared to 38 for the Lions. Ultimately, the Lions are blocking better and tackling better and playing a more sound version of football. Those were my notes at the half, and it kind of held up. And it's difficult to admit that right now the Ravens brand of football is not something that's easily recreated on a snap-by-snap basis against the best teams. I think you've got to give credit to Kelvin Shepard for adjusting during the game. John Morton, Dan Campbell as well. They came on the road in Baltimore. They avoided a 1-2 start with the Browns next. Increasingly, on the other side, I can absolutely understand why there's a growing segment of Ravens fans who think there's just going to be more nights like this against high-quality opponents, no matter how much talent John Harbaugh has on his roster. I kind of count myself among them at this point, unless or until something changes with this coaching staff and the way they get things done, defensively in particular, but also some of the things I think Harbaugh is involved in, special teams, and then critical play calls on offense, where I think he's definitely involved in it and perhaps the guy calling the play. I don't know that results are going to change against the best quarterbacks in the league and the teams that come in the most prepared. Detroit is clearly one of those teams right now, and the Ravens are not. You guys are welcome to let me know what elements of the game you think I missed and what I perhaps was too harsh on Harbaugh and the Ravens about. I think the Lions deserve a ton of credit here. They basically stole victory from the – I don't want to say stole. They earned the victory and took it from Baltimore, and the Ravens couldn't do anything about it. More physical, higher efficiency brand of football that Detroit played on Monday night, and I think they deserve to win. Appreciate you guys' time.